Excellent. Thank you. All right. Today is the day that we are going to be celebrating Purim, but it actually starts tomorrow at. I know there are a lot of alarms going off today. A lot of sirens going off in the world. You look at that map of Israel and Bahrain and all those American bases too. A lot of sirens. A lot of people in bomb shelters right now. Maybe that was a sign. I'll look at it. Purim is a time of judgment, actually, on God's way of looking at things. It was a time that judgment is pronounced on different different nations and different people. Um, saw a very definite pronouncement of judgment. Yesterday with the Ayatollah Khomeini assassinating many generals. Um, and I look at that as God's judgment on, on, on satanic religion and enslavement of the group of people. So we pray for their freedom from their slavery, that they can have freedom to worship to God, freedom to be joining the people of God. So Purim actually, it comes from the word pur, not as a cat purrs, but anybody know what a pur is? Anybody remember from past school? Yeah, casting the lot. Okay, so whatever that lot was, whether it was sticks that were drawn or whether it was a die that would be cast, it was determining the date that the Jews would be exterminated. Wasn't that nice? Um, yeah. So one wicked man um, who hated the Jews decided that he would use his power, his role in politics, to decide when a group of people would be exterminated. So they cast the lot, they cast the Purim, the plural, and they came up with a date, which would be the month and the day that all those people would be exterminated in one day. All right, throughout the entire uh, province. There were 127 provinces in Persia at that time. So basically from Ethiopia to India. It was a vast area, 127 provinces in the Persian Empire. Okay, uh, so this festival then would look back to the day after those events actually took place because you're not going to be celebrating as you're fighting. Okay, you're going to be celebrating the next day. So we see the 13th of Adar, which is the 12th month of the calendar, um, that this event took place, and then they would celebrate the next day. And then the people in the capital city, which would be Shushan, they would celebrate that second day because the other provinces were fighting the first day, and then they were fighting that second day. So it's a 2-day kind of celebration, but only because the second day for any walled city in the world, it would be indicative of Shushan. All right. So Shushan, the capital of Persia. We see the king, Ash Ahasuerus, who's also, I have to really rehearse that one as a tongue twister. Stay with me. You'll see what I mean. Ahasuerus. All right, so when I mess up on it, you don't judge me, okay? All right. That is the Persian way of saying his name. He was also known as Xerxes the First. Xerxes the First. That would be the Greek uh, equivalent to that name. Okay. Um, and then we deal with a lady that is the heroine of the Purim story, and her name was Hadassah. Hadassah means myrtle. But because she was a Jew living in the Persian Empire, and this is after the Babylonian captivity, and many of the Jews had already gone back. Remember with Cyrus, he let the Jews go back to rebuild, and well, they didn't all go back. Some of them, because they were there for quite a while, they had established themselves in the Persian Empire. It was a long time. It was a 70-year period that they that were there. You can imagine if your people are someplace for 70 years, it's not just easy to pick up and go back. You've kind of acclimated to living in the place. So, so the Jews that remained there then, these are the Jews that we're dealing with here. And this, this heroine of our story today, whose name was Hadassah, she changes her name because she doesn't want to be viewed as one of these captives that were brought into the Persian Empire. Okay? She didn't want to have a stigma associated with her in the story that we're getting into. And then she chose the name, which is Persian, that means star. Star. I had married people subject. Um, and that name would be Esther. So when the king meets Esther, he recognized, no, it's a person. There was no question about it being Jewish. And which brings us to a large part of the story, the hidden nature of the story. It's the only book that doesn't mention the name of God in it that we find in the Bible. You think, now that's a curious thing. No, but the point is, I believe, and that many others believe, is that God isn't mentioned deliberately because it's in faith that we work, knowing that He is behind the scenes in our life, pulling strings and arranging things, making appointments for us, making things available to us, that He's always there, and that even though we don't see Him directly, it's our faith believing that He is at work on our behalf, as we'll see happening in the story today. So, I'd like to introduce the characters now in our story. This will be an interactive story, and I'll explain that in just a minute. First of all, we have the figure of Mordecai. Mordecai was the cousin of Hadassah, who would be called Esther. And, obviously he was Jewish. He was a Benjamite, just like St. Paul was a Benjamite. And his emblem was the wolf. So he is a very wise man. But he's still, he's there because he was, he was a captive, and all the Jews were brought over. And he's basically raising Hadassah from childhood to adulthood. Esther is very beautiful. It didn't actually work out to be a good thing initially for him because when we get into the story here, you'll see why her beauty actually got her even into the story that we're looking at. Okay, we see a very evil figure known as Haman or Haman. To look at it more accurately, he is a very evil figure. He is a descendant of King Agag, and therefore he's referred to as being an Agagite. And if we look at the very, and he's from Amalek, and so the people that were from that group, they were all called Amalekites because of their reference to the geographic location of Amalek. And if we remember that God didn't really want any king, but the Israelites insisted on doing it their way. So the first king of Israel was Saul. And Saul was given the command by God to kill all of the Amalekites, their animals, everything about them, to destroy, not keep anything. Well, Saul decided to do it his own way. That's that. And so he kept the finest of food. He kept the finest of livestock for some of his men and himself. And he killed everybody else off. But he let the king live. And while the king lived, it's written that a chambermaid had visited him while in prison, and she became impregnated by him. And so this wicked character in our story today, Haman, or Haman, is the descendant then of the Amalekite, Agagite king, Agag. That makes sense? That's a lot of words. Just know Amalekite bad. Yeah, that will give you an indication. See, when you don't do something that God wants you to do, things only go downhill from there when you try to defy His plan. And so then we see Samuel, the prophet, saying, "Why didn't you do what God had asked you to do?" So he takes the sword and he actually chops up King Agag in many pieces, and then his people walk through the pieces. It's kind of like the reverse of a covenant, where they would take a bull, split it in half, and then the people making the covenant would would walk through the middle of that, kind of like on that order, except this order was a condemnation. So, all right, so we see the evil Haman that's going to do doing some very bad things and devising a plan to exterminate all of the Jews. Okay, then we see the king. The king is Akash Zeros, king of Persia, and he's a person that has a very erratic personality. He can be very, very easygoing and fun when things are going well, which things were pretty much good because nobody was opposing them for a long time. So much that he just spent money his days just enjoying life. Okay, and so we're going to see a long-term party that he is going to be having. You get ready for your guests to come over for like a day or two, and then you think, boy, it's nice to see him go because it's so exhausted. Well, his party was like 180 days. Think of that. To have that kind of time. And then even extended that for 8 more days. But we'll talk about that too. But he was very erratic. When things were going well, he was very easy to get along with. One example is somebody offered him like a large gift, and he said, "Oh, I'll tell you what, you just keep it." And then he gave him a gift in return, just fun loving. But then another time, the same person that he was having so much fun with approached him and said, "Hey, can my son be exempt from being in the army?" And he was so incensed by that request that he actually killed his son, chopped him up in pieces, to show you how erratic his behavior is. So this is a king that we're going to be dealing with here in our story. Then we have a queen that the king is married to. Her name is Vashti. Vashti was, we don't know a lot about her, but we know that she had some principles, and she wasn't just going to give in to the whims of a king. So we'll get into that, and she ends up being banished from the kingdom, and she's never allowed to approach the king ever again. So we assume that she was banished from the kingdom altogether. Some people think that she was put to death, but there's no evidence of that. So we'll look at her. So these are the characters of our play today. And when I'm telling you the story, it's going to be interactive. And on our screen right now, underneath the names, when I say the name Mordecai, you will respond, Exalted One. And when we deal with the name Esther, you will say, Beautiful. And when we say the name Haman, or Haman, you will say, Boo. And I brought a couple of bloggers along too, and we'll pass that. The reason we're doing this is not to just annoy the other people around you, but it's to blot out the name Haman. You don't want to hear that evil name. All right? This is tradition. I didn't come up with it, so don't blame me. Okay? And then when we get to Akbarosh, you will say, "Good to be the king." I got this from. It is, yeah. We are going to keep this up there, so you have no excuse for not participating. Okay, and I took that line from Mel Brooks. Good to be the king. Remember that? All right. Then we get to Vashti, Queen Vashti. We're going to say bye-bye, bye-bye, because she was banished. Didn't come again. All right. Everybody ready? Oh, one more thing that didn't make the big screen, the medium-sized screen. Anyway, when we say the word Jew or Jews, you're going to say oy vey, out of exasperation, dismay. Oy vey. All right. Story of Purim. Story of Purim. The Jews from the Babylonian captivity that remained in the Persian Empire were, were thriving. They were under the sovereignty of King Ahasuerus, and things were going well until a man named Haman who came along. Oh, what? Said, would you pass out four of those groggies? I've got four there, and Pastor, would you take this one and grog a little bit? Thanks. Okay, so things were going pretty well until this evil man, who was kind of a favorite of the king, um, decided that he needs to be honored. The king already made him second in command of the Persian Empire. He was well respected by the king, and even got to wear a signet ring and so forth. Um, he had a nice house in the Persian Empire, like a palace for himself. Um, but he decided that wasn't enough. He needed to be worshipped also. And this was mom. And and so one day Haman was walking and he sees Mordecai. Everybody else is bowing to him. And as they're bowing, he notices that Mordecai is not bowing. He is not going to give any worship to Haman. Well, this ticked off Haman, as you can imagine. And so Haman goes to the king. Good to be the king. And he says, you know, King Ahasuerus, I can't help but noticing that Mordecai the Jew, does not bow to me. And that means he wouldn't bow to you either. They don't bow to us. We should not have anybody like this in our kingdom here. Well, David writes the king. He'd like to be bowed to, and he'd like to be worshipped, sure. And he made a good case and said, yeah, it sounds like the thing to do. We shouldn't have that in our kingdom. He says, well, how about if we make this a law? That we just get rid of these people that aren't bowing. The Jews don't do it. So an edict was drawn up, and that hot wax was melting, a signet ring was coming. King Ahasuerus takes his signet ring and he stamps it. Well, now, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, that law cannot be changed. And so the annihilation of the people was decided on after the conversation. And in one day, the plan to kill all the Jews was now in motion. The only thing they had to decide on was the day. So Haman cast lots, and cast lots, and the lot that came up would be the 13th day of Adar, which would be the 12th month. And this is the day that in every province it would be posted that all the Jews are to be annihilated. So anybody that hated the Jews was given free rein to kill off the Jews in every one of the 127 provinces of the Persian Empire. So, the queen now, that is Esther. Let me back up here a little bit. Let me back up here. Let me get into the whole story of the banquet now. Okay, let me back up. Okay, so we said that the king Ahasuerus liked to party. So he had gone through his 180 days of partying, drunkenness and frivolity and many other things. He gets to the point where he's now extended to 8 days for just the capital city, Shushan, for just the people living there. And on the seventh day of this period, he's really drunk and it's turning really out of hand in a very bad way. And he decides to have his eunuch go and to get his beautiful wife, Queen Vashti. And she knows that she's not going to be demeaned because she knows what his intentions are. Um, he wants to parade her around, and, not even scantily clothed, um, and he wants to do some very vulgar things as an exhibition. It's turned into a drunken sexual party, actually. Um, and she doesn't want to have any part of it. Okay? It wasn't in Persian culture that you do that anyway, but when you're the king, so she didn't want to have any part of that, and she refused to come. Well, he was incensed that she wouldn't come because he's the king. He never turned down the king. And so Vashti remained in her party with the other women that she was throwing and didn't come. Well, it was decided then in talking to his counselors, hey, what do we do about this? How could she diss me like that? And what are the other women in this province and this person's kingdom going to do if they see that the king can be this like, what's the age of feminism? What's the age of women's rights? That's for sure. So you can't have this. So he decided that the queen will lose the title. No more will the queen ever be able to come near him. Okay, and therefore we're going to have a look for a new queen. So he was advised by his counselors that they would look for the most beautiful virgins in all the 127 provinces of the Persian Empire. And Hadassah was, Shushan at the time, capital city. And so she was selected as one of the beautiful women that would be taken to the harem of the king, King Ahasuerus, and they would be prepared for 1 year's time, 6 months of bathing in myrrh. 6 months of bathing in myrrh. That's really last. Sometimes it's funny. And then 6 months also of delving into cosmetics, perfume, so that in a year's time they will be ready to meet King Ahasuerus. So it came to be that time, and Hadassah, now known as Esther, approaches the king and finds favor with the king. And when you find favor with the king, after a night with the king, then you wait to see if he's going to call you back for a second date, so to say. And he did. And he ended up actually falling in love with her and made her his queen. So now, it's not just Esther, but it's Queen Esther. So as she's enjoying being a queen, we see that her cousin Mordecai overhears a couple of eunuchs of the king, Ahasuerus, and they're plotting to kill him. Well, he reports this to Esther because he cannot go to the palace, he didn't have clearance. Probably had a special tag on him. So he was not able to go there. But he could tell the queen, tell the king, of which he did. And so Esther tells Ahasuerus that there's a plot to kill him. And the king acts on it, and these two eunuchs then were put to death. And it's written of in the annals that this event happened. But somehow, maybe the king was thinking of more parties and drinking, but he forgot to reward Mordecai. Slip of the mind. Slip of the mind, something so small, I guess. That's all. Right. But anyway, it was written about. And so, this is just an event that happens that will have some fruit later on. Okay, so Esther is enjoying being the queen. She is beautiful. And And old Haman is up to his plot to annihilate Mordecai and then all of the Jews. So he makes this plot to kill him, and he starts posting it in the different provinces that he is to be, so that all the Jews are to be killed on that 13th of Adar. And so Esther has no idea about this, but Mordecai, the cousin of Queen Esther, is is, uh, is asked to go before the king to plead for the life of the Jews. So she does. But before that happens, she's thinking, hey, wait a minute. I can't just go before the king. If I go before the king without being invited, I'll be killed. It's against the law. Nobody can approach the king without invitation. So she's going to be between a rock and a hard place. So she asked Mordecai, please fast and pray. Have all our Jewish people fast and pray for 3 days. Mordecai tells her by assuring her that, that you've been called to this for a time like this. We'll look at that passage. Wonderful passage. And that if you don't do it, God will have somebody else do it. But don't think that you would be spared by not doing it, because as a Jew, you be killed also. Okay. So 3 days come and go, and now approaches welcome to the court. Much everybody chagrin and wonder how she has the chutzpah to walk in without being invited. He looks at her and she looks at him, and what might happen. So through the workings of God, he found favor. He extended his golden scepter. She acknowledged the life is spared, but it's no. And she doesn't want to say everything that she knows. She wants to wait for the proper time, proper moed, that's proper God's timing. So she says, I would like to invite you and Hemam to a banquet that I would like to have for you. A wine banquet, a smaller banquet. I'd like to have you. Would you please come? Sure, we'll come to the banquet. And Hemam, being full of himself, thinking, oh, this is all about me. Yeah, because I'm really something. So Nick tells the wife about it. He says, you know what? Why don't you go ahead and build a big gallows? You can pay that Mordecai, you know, just to help celebrate. So he makes, so there's like a hangman's gallows that's set up 75 feet tall. 75 feet tall. So not only he can enjoy the thing, but share with everybody. He wants to see Mordecai thing. I think about lampstands. We talked about the feast. The lampstand is like 50 feet tall. So the whole city could see the light like God. Here we see the evil part of that the whole city. So anyway, so he makes this hangman gallows, being full of himself, hangman, and he goes off to this banquet, uh, and she doesn't reveal what he really wants. The king says, what did you want? He tell me, you can have up to half of my kingdom. He says, well, I requested that you come tomorrow for another thing. And Haman is like happy because he's, again in his mind, he's thinking it's all about him. It's kind of like when my dog, is there. People come to the house. He thinks that they're all coming because of him. That's kind of like what Haman is. So anyway, Haman comes, and the king comes, and the king didn't sleep well that night. Ahasuerus kept rolling around in bed, and he just couldn't sleep. And so he called a couple of his eunuchs over and said, I think it's sleep. Can you bring me some reading material? So they pulled up some of the annals that, told the history of what was happening in the empire. And lo and behold, what did he turn to? The story of the two eunuchs that were plotting to assassinate. And it credits Mordecai, the Jew, as being the person that tipped him off this would happen. And he reads there that nothing was done to reward him. So he goes to this banquet. He posed a question to Haman. He says, Haman, what would you do to reward somebody that was very noble, somebody that's really deserving of honor? He thought that he was talking about himself again. And so he said, well, you should give him the king's robe to wear. You should clothe him in blue and white, royal colors. You should give him signature. You should let him rise and be paraded so everybody can see how great this man is on your own place. Great idea. All right, let's do this for Mordecai then. Sorry, what? So he ends up parading Mordecai through the streets then. I mean, somebody that hates him, somebody wants to kill him. Now he's being paraded and honored by the man that actually devises the plan to kill him. Okay, so he has to still go to this banquet and figure out what in the world is happening. So he goes to the banquet then. At the banquet then, that's when Queen Esther goes to be. And she says, my king, there's been an evil plot developed by this man to annihilate all of my people who deals with the truth. So that would include the queen. Well, the queen and the king were honestly in love with each other. They truly loved each other. Can you imagine being tricked into signing something that is going to end up killing your queen, and you can't do anything about it because you signed it, and the law of the proof can't be undone. So King Ahasuerus storms out of the room where they're at. Haman knows that his life is in the balance, and he flees on his hands and knees, and he falls at the feet of Esther. Well, guess what? That's a no-no also. You don't approach the queen either in her proximity. And so he's at her feet, and when the king storms back into the room, he sees her, and the take on the situation that he's looking at is that he was now assaulting the queen. So guess what? He went off. Well, he actually got to keep his head. He wouldn't hang very well without. Unless he had a hook or something. Yeah, so he needed his head to be hung. So he was hung on the very gallows that were made for Mordecai. So, but now what to do about that edict? Once it's written, you can't just annul it. So we said what we'll do is we will have a new edict that will also counter this one. So we will allow the Jews and the Persian Empire to prepare for this, that they can arm themselves, and that they can fight any enemies that come against them. So we're looking at 8 months of planning, okay? So you get to that time in the dark, 12 months. And so they arm themselves, they prepared for this, and then when that fateful day came, the dark, they were prepared. There were 75,000 people that were killed in conflict. Many of the people, for fear of God of Israel, the God of the Jews, actually joined with the Jews, and their numbers increased. And many of them just saw the sovereignty that God's hand was on that people for this to happen. 75 enemies of Jews were killed at that time. And then they came and celebrated that next day. When it finally rest. And that next day, then the king says, "What can I do for you? What can I give you?" He says, "Well," says, "I would like to have the same thing happen in our own capital city here, God." And then 500 were killed at that point. And then she makes an odd statement. She says, "And I would like the sons of Haman to be hanged." Well, you might not think that was such an unusual request because they were all unusually bad too, carrying on the secret. But the thing was that they were already hanged the previous day. I don't know why you'd hang the bed again. Dirty laundry on the line. But you know, but it's because he was referring to a future event. You see, Haman was an antichrist. There have been many antichrists throughout history. We read it in the Hanukkah story. We read it now in Purim. We read it in many other stories too. We read it with Adolf Hitler. You know, many antichrists, and there's going to be more to come. Also, one major antichrist. That's why it's important for all of us to understand these holidays. And although this is one of the feasts of the Lord, this is a national holiday, just like Hanukkah. But we need to understand who God is, who we are in relation to Him. We are His people, like we sing, "I am a child of God." We know that God is working on our behalf. So when these antichrists come along, that we can, number one, be discerning of what's happening. You know, a lot of prophecies are taking place even understanding. It's telling the story of Purim. You know, we see the Ayatollah was taken out. Ayatollah Khomeini was taken out yesterday. He's leading charge for the annihilation of all the Jews once again. So Stalin was calling for that, and guess what? He died on Purim before that could happen. Plans were already made for that. Many other things too. And, so anyway, what happens then is Mordecai then takes the authority that Haman had. He lives in his house. He's given his house, and Queen Esther's given the house also. She's actually appointed him to be the magistrate of that. So he's the second now in command of the Persian Empire. And reversal of fortune. You know, we see that so often in the Bible, like Joseph. You know, he goes from being a slave to being, second in command of Egypt. We see now that same scenario. We also see that that Haman wanted to kill all of the Jews in one day. Then, when we look at the prophecy of Israel, that it would come to be born in a day. Israel was born in the day of the prophet. Satan meant for evil, God meant for good. And Satan isn't very creative. In my archive, I left it down creative with so creativity, so repeating, mopping, and copying. So yeah, he's not creative. So he sees things and he repeats himself. So we need to be wise and know what happened, in the past, so that we don't repeat those things. Yes, he's always repeating. And he's going to once again, if he's trying right this very minute to annihilate all the Jewish people. Okay? So anyway, back to our story. So you see that now that Esther and Mordecai continued to live in the Persian Empire, and they continued to live there. And today you can find their graves there, their monuments to Esther and Mordecai, still in Shushan, Persian Empire. All right, so that is our story of Purim. And then let's look at a couple things here. Some notable quotes here. this is one that will be, if you will remain. If you will remain silent at this time, relief and salvation will come to the Jews from another source. In other words, God's will be done. So if man is uncooperative, he's going to find somebody else to do what you've been appointed, what you've been called to do. If God asks you to do something, I highly, highly recommend you doing it because it will be done. And number one, you almost got on major blessings, but it will happen. And you in the house of your father will be lost. And who knows if not for such a time as this, that you reach this royal position. You know, what would have happened to Hadassah had she not been obedient to the call in her life, even at the risk of her life. Okay. And fear not them which kill the body, from Matthew 10:28, but are not able to kill the soul, but rather fear him which is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Esther 4:15 and 16. Then Esther bade them return Mordecai with answer. Go, gather all the Jews that are present in Susan or Susa, and fast you for me, neither eat or drink for 3 days. So when we celebrate Purim, we celebrate beginning with a fast. It should be a fast before, just to honor what Esther did, fast before that holiday. And then to celebrate the holiday itself, then you feast and you give gifts to one another. And you give gifts to the poor. So gifts to people close to you, and you also give gifts to the poor as part of the celebration. I also goes on to say, I also, in my maidens, will fast likewise, and so I will continue unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. Here you see queen pleading for King Ahasuerus. Here I've got a picture of the golden scepter that was reaching toward Esther, showing that she found favor with him and that her life would be spared. And then here we see a wonderful painting of Mordecai on the white steed as he's been paraded in the street. The artist got the colors wrong. You think I'm blue and white. Really good to see. Okay, here we see Haman hanging from his own gallows, and that his sons would hang there. And then, an interesting thing in 1946, Purim Fest, at the Nuremberg trials, there was a person that was writing the newspaper articles for Der Stürmer magazine, and his name was Julius Streicher. And even 20 years before the event in 1946, he was causing hatred against the Jews. And he was well versed in the Purim story, and he was like printing things like, remember what the Jews did in the Persian Empire? They killed 75,000 people. This is what's going to happen to us. This is what they're planning against us. We need to annihilate them. So he was familiar with the story. He was actually obsessed with the story, and he was putting out these things even 20 years before 1946 in his trial, the trial. And then he was one of Hitler's henchmen until he got even so extreme, so way out there that he was even kind of expelled from the party because he was so extreme. You can imagine that. But anyway, he made a lot of people believe. We all know what the media can do. When the media purports things that are not godly, not truthful, they keep saying them over and over, and look how many people would do many things that I want to talk about right now, but you can probably think of it through yourself. You end up believing that. But there were a lot of people that lost their lives, and that was the reason that he was one of the people that was killed or executed at the Nuremberg trial. But anyway, at any rate, when it's time for him to be hanged, he was having a pretty rough time with it. He didn't go up like willingly. He was fighting, kicking, screaming things. One of the things he screams out is, Purim Fest 1946. And it was a repeat of Purim, a repeat of mom being pain, 10 sons of pain. It's interesting because there were 10 people that were executed. And then during, which is kind of like the implementer of the final solution, not as much like, yeah, that was hot off pipe, but he was an implementer on how that plan would work. He was in jail, and uh, and he was also a known cross-dresser, and therefore people say that his part of that story is that he was actually the wife that was urging everybody else to do the dirty work, like to make big gallows. It's very interesting. Ten, were killed just like Purim. So very interesting. And then also when it was written about, this I think is just so unbelievable. When it was written, the story, um, that there were 3 little letters in lowercase letters that were written into the text above the names of the children. What you're looking at there, I don't know if you can see it up on the screen. If you look at that right-hand column, go 2 down. There's a little short word, and you go down to the next one. See a little circle there? Everybody see that? That's one of those letters that were written in lowercase. And those letters, when added up, see, in Hebrew, every letter has a geometric value or a numerical value. And those values correspond to words and correspond to ideas. And so when we add those up, you end up with 5707. Okay? We're 707 with 5 in front of it. 5 was the actual 1,000 years, millennium. We're heading to the 7th millennium. God created the earth in 7 days. So it's thought that that's the 8th year. And then the 707 is the actual numeric value, and that shows when they were killed. That corresponds to the year 5707 is the year 1946. So that's when Esther says, tomorrow, who is good today? I want you to hang them. But again, with Satan meant for evil, God meant for good. Today we see, again, calls for the elimination of Jewish people. And sadly enough, we even see Christians that are siding against Israel, which is really bad. Bad for them, because what they're doing is they're really, when you think about it, they are denying God that has established eternal statutes for His people. It is God that will bring the Messiah to the time. And if the Jewish people are not there, it's not going to happen. I mean, so people that are really working against Israel and boycotting and things like that, do not get involved in that because it's an evil thing. You're denying God what He has said would happen. And the Messiah coming from God's mind that He's established. So, back to Esther 9:19. Therefore, the Jews, the villages, dwelled in the unwalled towns, the 14th day of the month Adar, the day of great gladness and fasting, and a good day, and sending portions to one another. So Christians have the hobby of giving gifts at Christmas time, but Jews give the gift at Purim. Everything's turned on its head. The exiled Jewish orphan becomes the queen of an empire. The unbending righteous Mordecai is raised up from death row, the highest king, second only to himself. So some things that we have at Purim. We always do the Esther or the Purim spiel. Spiel is talk, get it, English. Um, and this is that Megillah. This is the Esther Megillah, and the scroll will be read. Megillah is a scroll, it's a book, and it will be read. You read the whole story, and you interact like we can with our interactions here through that story. Helps keep people attentive to the story, get them involved with it. But it's the telling of the story over and over again to remind them who God is, that He is working behind the scenes. And I brought the mask, and we did a workshop on making these masks for Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead celebration. Latin people with a Memorial Day for their loved ones have gone on. It's not an evil day, but it's a day of recognizing them. They do fun masks. And then the cookies also, another way to show the hidden nature of the story is by making a cookie called hamantaschen. Hamantaschen literally means Haman's cat. Cat. And so his cat hides the sweet fruit flavor inside. Hidden. You'll see it. I would buy it if it wasn't. If I could see a little bit of it. But so these are going to be on our tale food story. The beginning of the Haman cat. It's the cookie of Purim. Yeah, I never heard that they are. Um, yeah, I've never heard that. That would be interesting. That would be really interesting. Yeah, that is really interesting. But I'll have to ask the people I know if they've ever found out anything about any of them that's a part of it. But it also goes to show too that these demon spirits, they don't die out. You know, they were there from long ago, and they're still around. They're still doing the same things. Like I said, they're not creative. Okay, they just copy and they just repeat things. So we've seen many annihilation stories throughout the ages. Many. Uh, God is always super. That's why she's a thinker. Good. All right. You guys have any other questions? Right. Yeah, there will be no Messiah. Right. So another thing that they do is you can wear costumes to to celebrate Purim. I went as a wolf last year, created, and almost everybody dressed like a character from the story, like which was not the case for the rabbi. Formerly there was that, for instance, but this year that I come as a wolf, everybody else is like a character in the story. I came in late in the first, and everybody looked like kind of different. But anyway, we celebrate Purim and we celebrate God's goodness, even in things that we don't see Him directly involved in. He's always there. Cheers.